let me introduce you to Oliver. Oliver is part of the customer care and operations team at A Plus Bank, and in his role as banking support specialist, one of the requests he has to deal with quite regularly is the approval of letters of undertaking, or an LOU. Now, an LOU is a form of bank guarantee relating to short-term credit. So it is quite an important process, but the volumes are not high enough to justify an IT project to build out a dedicated service case. As such, Oliver's team want to ensure that the request and the approval process is standardized so that they can ensure some consistency, some accuracy, and quite importantly, timeliness. So Oliver is going to use the BIY tool to create a workflow for this process. From his dashboard, Oliver creates a new workflow design case to get this started. So he'll first need to define his workflow, then he'll need to get it tested and validated, and then get it approved before it is published. Now this is a pretty controlled environment, but he's able to do all of this in the BIY tool without any IT support, and he's doing this in the production environment. So after completing the metadata fields that will define his new workflow, Oliver is presented with a simple and guided process to easily define and configure all the steps of his workflow, including the data fields, the process flow steps, and the all-important SLAs. Now, as you can see, Oliver can very easily add the fields from his workflow, including the configuration of validations and other options such as whether the fields are going to be available for reporting. So Oliver adds all the fields that he needs and configures them with the validations and options. And next, BIY will prompt him to lay out the steps of his workflow. And as you can see, this is a very simple and straightforward process, but the result is quite powerful and elegant. Oliver can very easily outline the intent of his workflow steps and define the status of those tasks. For each step, he can also configure the UI layout of the form, define the routing and business rules, and other options that are made available in the context of A Plus Bank. So Oliver adds all the forms that he needs, specifies the intents of what he's trying to capture with those forms, and defines things like whether they're going to be mandatory fields. He's able to very easily preview what those forms are going to look like, change the layouts, and select what works for the type of information that he's trying to capture. This is actually a very easy way to create a form without having to technically code one. So Oliver continues to configure the rest of the process steps, including the routing aspects. He's going to add the additional steps that he needs. In this particular example, he wants an approval step, and that's the core part of the LOU request that they want to automate with this workflow process. Oliver sets the status for the approval step. And once he's done that, he can define the work basket where he wants this step to be routed to. He also has access to the toolkit and can define things like the ability to attach a file. These are common items that can be added as part of the workflow. Next, he'll add the last step, which is the resolution step. And the best part about this is he can actually set the case to auto-resolve. Once he's happy with the steps for his workflow, he can move to the next step. SLAs are a critical factor in the efficiency of the customer care and operations department at A+. And Oliver can very easily specify the service level expectations for the LOU request coming into A Plus Bank. He'll define the goal time, the deadline times, and also the associated escalation actions if the goal and deadline times are not met at a future date. Now, Oliver selects a date in the future and gets to the final step where he can now review all the items he has configured for his workflow before he submits it for approval to his manager. And now with BIY, it is very easy for the business to take control of the operation servicing needs, but they're doing so in a very governed and controlled manner, as you can see. Once Oliver submits this newly designed workflow, the next stage is for it to be thoroughly tested. The BIY solution will automatically create a default test case, and then Oliver can add additional test cases that are more targeted. In the example here, Oliver wants to ensure that the fields that he's defined as part of this workflow to be mandatory are behaving as expected. So he simply creates a new test case for that scenario. And this is where Harry comes in. He's from the QA team and will run those test cases for Oliver. Once he has completed his part of the test, the workflow will simply go to the next step, which was an approval step. And the case is automatically routed because it's been defined as part of the workflow. And in this case, Nicole comes into play, who's the actual manager of the operations team. So as you can see, Nicole pulls the task from the approvals work basket. She has access to the entire case information at her fingertips. And after reviewing those details, she can make her decision on this particular test case. Nicole is happy with what she sees and approves the test case. Now coming back to Oliver, he checks on the progress of his proposed new workflow. And he can see that the case is at the validation stage, with both test cases now approved and completed. So he's ready to release his workflow. And the final step is now to get the overall workflow approved. So the configured workflow is ready for final approval. Again, Nicole is going to be our approver. She pulls it from the work basket, reviews the workflow steps and fields, notes that the test cases that have been run. She's basically ensuring it's going to meet the business expectations. There is, of course, an audit log of all the designed steps. And this really gives full visibility and auditability about the processes that you have as part of your business. So A+ is quite happy with this, and they're being able to design processes this way using the BIY tool. In a very short amount of time, Oliver was able to easily configure a new approvals workflow for the LOU requests, have it tested and validated by his team members, and is now ready to publish this workflow for use by the wider team at A+. This is definitely going to result in a much better outcome for the bank and their customers.